Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another Sunday night edition of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. With me, as always, is Mike Tagliere. You can find us on Twitter at DanHarris80 and at Mike Tagliere NFL. So, Tags, I love the early London games, right? I mean, it's amazing. We get football starts at 9:30 a.m. if you're on the East Coast like me in the morning, and it doesn't end until 11:30. But days like today, man, they make it very hard to be a fantasy analyst because everything was just out of control. There were a million injuries. There were like hurricane winds. It was just too wild for me.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on. That's like the difficult part, right? It's like a lot of people asking advice that time in the morning, and it's like I get up and I hear, like, I tried letting everybody know on Twitter that Melvin Gordon was probably not going to play, that Rob Gronkowski wasn't going to play, and there's a lot of people with questions, but on Sunday mornings, it's like we're as busy as ever. Like, I know I'm busy doing a lot of different stuff on Sunday mornings, and then I do the live stream, so it's like all these questions floating in, and I wish I can get to them all, but it does make for one hectic Sunday morning for a lot of people, and one guy told me that he panicked with Melvin Gordon going down, that he traded away Alshon Jeffrey for Duke Johnson out of a panic, and now he's like kicking himself because of it.
I mean, come on. I mean, that can't fall on us or anything like that. That's obviously not what you need to do in that situation. You just sort of do what you can. Now, the one good thing about that, frankly, is that both the Melvin Gordon news, Gronkowski a little bit more because he was essentially declared out yesterday. He didn't make the trip to Chicago. Gordon, though, was downgraded yesterday. And I mean, we talked about it. They signed, I can't remember what his name is off the top of my head, but the guy off their practice squad, which was a big sign that they weren't going to have a bye next week. It seemed likely that he was going to miss. So, I mean, as fantasy owners, really what you need to do is you should on Saturday night always just do a very quick check. Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport are almost always going to tweet out if there's anything substantial going on. But yeah, man, it was crazy. And if you owned Melvin Gordon and you were left without a backup plan, you were in a lot of trouble today. So hopefully that guy can salvage the rest of his season, because that trade obviously did not work out too well today.
No.
Probably won't in the future, but you never know, man. It's fantasy. Who knows, you know?
Yeah, so, that's true.
Right, a lot of things happen. All right, Tag, so what's your biggest takeaway on what was a pretty crazy Sunday?
I don't even know what to call this week, because it was one where you kind of just throw your hands up and say, you know what, it happens. And I'm putting it in place of something else. But the thing is, the real truth of the matter is you kind of have to overlook some performances some weeks, and this is one of those weeks where it's just like nothing when it was supposed to. Even Justin Tucker, missed an extra point just now that literally would have tied the game and sent it in overtime against the Saints. But he had made 222 straight extra point attempts, and he missed the first one of his career to lose them the game. It's like that's like a definition of week 7 in the NFL. And I think we just need to, I don't want to say we need to look past it, but a lot of the stuff that happened was kind of a mirage. And I know we're going to talk about a lot of that stuff today, but there were a lot of running backs that really impressed me today, that we came out with a lot of running back news. Like, Kerryon Johnson had a big breakout week. Like, I think he's someone that a lot of people are starting to come around on. And meanwhile, we had Sony Michel go down with an injury. I think it was on like the 4th play of the game. And he looked really good too against the Bears. He touched the ball 3 times in the first 4 plays, was doing fine. And then all of a sudden he gets hurt, gets twisted. We don't know much about the injury as of right now. It looks like a knee or an ankle injury, but it didn't look good. He was twisted the wrong way. So we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff today, but it's one of those weeks where I think it's one not to kind of over panic about some of the things that did happen.
But I mean, I think the Justin Tucker thing, which happened legitimately right as we were about to record, I think that kind of sums up the day. The injuries, especially LeSean McCoy, also left after, I think he had 1 or 2 touches. So it was just one of those days. In the end, I think the big takeaway is I don't necessarily think that you should make any drastic sort of judgments about your team depending on how they fared this week, because it was insane. You had backup tight ends scoring 2 touchdowns. It was one of those days. So I completely agree with you. But I will give a little bit more of a firm takeaway for me. For me, it was Andrew Luck, and it's mainly because I've kind of been thinking about his success as largely tied to him playing constantly from behind. He constantly has the negative game script. He was on pace to break the single season record for pass attempts, and I was like, eventually that's going to kind of fade once the defense gets a little healthier. Here, you obviously had the most positive game script that you possibly can, and he had 4 touchdown passes on just 23 pass attempts and 156 yards. The reason why I think it's kind of significant, and today it kind of stood out to me, is coming into the game, Luck had 14 red zone touchdowns and 48 red zone passes, and both of those lead the league. I think, frankly, he's going to be a guy who, when they get down close, I know Marlon Mack had 2 touchdowns, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today, but in the end, I really do think that he's just going to keep piling on the touchdowns, because when they get down to the red zone, he really does throw quite a bit. Now, it's not the best schedule going forward. He does get the Jaguars twice, although as we saw today, that team is a mess, and I'm not sure if we're going to be quite as scared as that defense going forward. And the Titans are generally pretty good against quarterbacks, but at this point, Tags, we talk about it all the time. You've probably got, I don't know how many, 6, 7 maybe guys that you're like, these are QB1s. I'm feeling comfortable with these guys. I'm never going to take them out of my lineup. And the rest, no matter how good they are kind of streamable. I'm kind of starting to put luck into that upper category, where I think, you and I both had him similarly outside even the top 12 QBs. I think I had him 15th, you had him 16th, but I'm really thinking about moving him up a lot, because I really do think that this touchdown run that he's on is going to continue because of how much he throws in the red zone.
Yeah, I moved him inside the top 10 because we've seen him get better and better in the system. And I think that's another thing we had to remember, right? Because he was coming into a brand new offense. He didn't throw much throughout the offseason. In the preseason, he got some limited work in. So it's we had to expect that there was going to be some break-in period for this offense, and missing some of his receivers. Ryan Grant hasn't been very good. Jack Doyle, his safety blanket, has been out since week 2. Eric Ebron has had to turn into his number 1 receiver, while T.Y. Hilton has been out with an injury. They didn't have a running game. His offensive line is missing 3 starters, yet Andrew Luck continues to put up fantasy points, and a lot of it is volume derived. So I don't want to sit here and say that it was strictly because he was being ultra efficient, but nobody really would have been with that wide receiver core, with that offensive line. So knowing that T.Y. Hilton's back, knowing that Jack Doyle should be coming back at some point, things are looking up for him. I moved him inside my top 10 quarterbacks for the rest of the season, and if you wanted to tell me that you'd rather have him than Deshaun Watson right now, I wouldn't blame you at all.
That was somebody who I was going to ask you about, because you have Watson much higher than I did coming into this week. Again, you change your rankings. Unbelievably, you do it on Sunday, essentially. You start updating them, which was great. But you had Watson, I believe, 4th rest of season coming into this year, coming into this week. I had him 11th. Again, I've made my concerns about him very clear, especially with the injuries and stuff like that. But yeah, I had Luck behind him, but I agree. I think I'm going to have Luck in front of him going forward. So again, we'll talk about Deshaun Watson certainly in that game. But before we go any further, I do want to remind everyone about our latest giveaway. If you've listened to the show, you know exactly what it is. We're giving away a signed Davante Adams Packers helmet. It's really awesome. You can submit an entry in 30 seconds or less just by going to fantasypros.com/contest, and I'll tell you exactly what to do. Now, like all our signed giveaways, this one comes from Pristine Auction. And seriously, guys, Pristine Auction is awesome. As my son gets a little older and he becomes more and more obsessed with sports, I'm always on the lookout for cool memorabilia for him. So I'm browsing around Pristine Auction pretty much every day, because there are always random deals that pop up that are amazing. And some of the deals that I saw yesterday are fantastic. Mark Ingram signed Saints jersey for $46, a Tyreek Hill signed Chiefs jersey for $70, and a Le'Veon Bell signed Steelers helmet for $98. Now, part of the reason I love to browse around so much is because it's totally free to do it. There's no fee to register. There's no fee to bid. Unless you actually pay the price you want in a winning bid for one of their guaranteed authentic items, you don't pay anything at all. So go to pristineauction.com now, and I guarantee that you're really going to love it. That's PRISTINE.com. All right, Tags, as usual, let's give a winner and a loser today. Who's your winner?
My winner for the day, player-wise or team-wise?
Whatever you want to do, buddy. The world is your oyster.
Winner, I am going to go with Josh Gordon and Julian Edelman as a combination. With a lack of run game, Sony Michel going down with what looks to be a bad injury that's going to require, a multi-week absence. The Patriots defense hasn't been great. That receiving game is going to be skyrocketing in value. So Josh Gordon, Julian Edelman have each, I think Edelman's seen 15 targets. Josh Gordon, 14 targets over the last 2 weeks. You're going to start seeing more and more out of those guys. And biggest loser out of the week, I'm going to go with the Browns and Hugh Jackson. Hugh Jackson might be fired during the bye week. That's the rumor around the NFL right now, is that he's on thin ice heading into the bye week and that he might be let go. And this comes after Hugh Jackson said after the game, I think I might need to get my hands more involved in the offense. Yeah, Hugh, because that's worked out for you guys the last couple years when you acted as the offensive coordinator. So the Cleveland Browns, maybe help is on the way. Maybe it's not. Who knows? But it seems like Hugh Jackson is nearing the end.
I don't know, man. Personally, I really think Hugh Jackson was just right about to turn this whole thing around. I just feel like we haven't given him enough. It is a disaster, really. A 4th overtime game. By the way, at least for Browns fans, if you're feeling bad right now, you've got 4 overtime games already. 5, I believe, is the NFL record for a season. So you are right on your way to setting an NFL record. So that's something that you really want to hang your hats on. But obviously, I had not heard that yet. Again, we're just sort of doing this in the moment, this podcast. But that is amazing if Hugh Jackson gets fired, because he should have been fired prior to this year, which I think we all kind of felt. But the fact that he wasn't has been disappointing. But obviously, I don't think anybody would blame the Browns for moving on. Well, those are good, Tags. I love it. I've got some winners and losers, but you know what? Let's just get into the game recaps. I'll give them while we go through, and we can talk about it like that so we can keep going, because you kind of nailed it right there. I don't want to even try to follow up that act. Let's start again, as we always do, with a Thursday night game. A Broncos 45, Cardinals 10 was not competitive, obviously. Let's start with the Broncos real quick. Phillip Lindsay, 14 carries for 90 yards and a touchdown, 1 catch for 6 yards through the air. He was in on 60% of the snaps. That's a season high for him. Royce Freeman had a minor ankle injury, but that doesn't sound like it's going to be anything. But realistically, I wanted to let me get some quick hits. Okay, I'm going to give you Phillip Lindsay, and I'm going to give you another guy. And in the standard league, I want to tell me who you prefer rest of season. Okay, Phillip Lindsay or Alex Collins?
Lindsay.
Phillip Lindsay or Matt Breida?
Lindsay.
Phillip Lindsay or Marlon Mack?
Ooh, I might go Mack there.
Okay, that's the range, right? That's exactly where I was thinking. And what's that? Probably about mid RB2-ish? Is that where you are around?
I have Mack right now. I have Marlon Mack at RB20, and I was flirting with him in like RB18 to 20 range, and Lindsay is right there at 21, so they're right next to each other. Royce Freeman, they're saying it's a high ankle sprain that it could cost him multiple weeks. Now he's saying that he's going to try and play this coming week. It's not going to happen. So Phillip Lindsay, I did bump him up my chart a little bit just based on that, because I expect Freeman to miss at least one game, if not two. So Lindsay's value does go up. And knowing that, Case Keenum is not very good, and, that he's on thin ice, I do expect them to lean on the defense a little bit more. I expect them to lean on the run game a little bit more. So Lindsay is clearly the number one there right now. So I have him in that, mid to low end RB2 territory.
Yeah, that's about where I have him. And again, next week they're facing the Chiefs, so they're going to need some points, and they'll probably be playing from behind. So Lindsay's going to make a great start next week for sure. But going forward, I agree. I think I probably will have him slightly below Mack going forward, but he's definitely right in that mix. For the Cardinals, just a terrible game all around. But I do want to ask you something, because I don't want to read too much into this, but Mike McCoy was fired after the game, and Byron Leftwich is going to take over the play calling duties. Going forward, does that give you any optimism about David Johnson, who once again had just a pedestrian game, and again has been running almost directly straight through the tackles, his entire season, as opposed to getting him outside? He's getting barely tired in the passing game. Do you think there's going to be some sort of switch that's going to increase the value of David Johnson with the switch to Byron Leftwich?
It can't hurt. I want to be honest. I don't know what to expect out of Leftwich as the play caller, because we just don't know.
No, and to be clear, I'm not saying, Tags, give me your breakdown of Byron Leftwich as a play caller, anything like that. Obviously, it's impossible to take this as a negative. I'm really just saying at this point, right, the offense is so stagnant, and I get that you have a rookie QB, but it's been so uncreative. Don't you have to think that anybody coming in there, you, me, guy off the street, anybody coming in there is going to be like, maybe we should sort of start running David Johnson out more as a wide receiver, or running him outside the tackles more? Don't you think they're going to have to make that switch, and that there's going to be more of that?
Well, the fact that they hired Mike McCoy tells me they're incompetent.
Fair enough.
So, like seriously, even before he was hired, I mean, when he was hired, I think anybody that pays attention to Mike McCoy's past work, you would know that it was worrisome for them to bring him in for David Johnson. The offensive line is still bad. They're still missing some starters up front. Justin Pugh couldn't go last week. Rosen doesn't look very comfortable, and he was put in a bad spot as a rookie, but at the same time, he doesn't look good at all. There's just so many problems here. But the real question for me, this is when I was going through my rest of season rankings, who would you rather have the rest of the season? David Johnson or Christian McCaffrey in a standard or half PPR, let's say half PPR league? I think I'd rather take David Johnson, because Christian McCaffrey to me is a sell. And I know some people are like, Mike, why would you sell low? I'm like, I would rather, and I'm not lying, I would rather have James White than Christian McCaffrey on my fantasy team.
I don't think that is crazy at this point, particularly with Michel's injury and particularly with how White is performing. But we were going to get to McCaffrey in a bit, but why don't we just talk about him right now, since we're basically there? This was a game that kind of set up well for him. I mean, the Eagles obviously have a very good defense, a very good run defense, but they do struggle a bit against pass catching backs, and it was a negative game script. The Panthers won the game 21-17, but
Newton threw the ball 40 times.
Right, and going into the fourth quarter, they were down 17-0. It was perfect, and he just was, again, kind of pedestrian. 6 catches for 51 yards, 7 carries for 29 yards. You're really worried about him going forward then?
Yeah, no, extremely worried about him, and that's the thing is, you look at it, the difference in production between him and someone like Jalen Richard outside of that, like, and this, people are going to be like, oh God, Mike, like listening. And I'm being serious now. Like, just listen, just think about it. That Jalen Richard has scored at least 11 and a half PPR points in 4 of 6 games. McCaffrey, outside of that one game against the Bengals, where they were down to like essentially like one starting defensive tackle, there hasn't been much change there. I mean, McCaffrey is obviously better, and I haven't ranked as such, but McCaffrey has been a disappointment. He hasn't scored a rushing touchdown yet. He has 1 receiving touchdown. They have Greg Olsen back. They're starting to involve DJ more, like in the offense a bit more. Jarius Wright still playing. Curtis Samuel's back. Devin Funchess is getting his. There's just so many moving parts in this offense, and knowing that the volume has been increased in the passing game, it is not helping McCaffrey's cause over the last few weeks that he hasn't really done anything with it. So who would you rather have, though, David Johnson or Christian McCaffrey for the rest of the season?
I think it's going to sound a little crazy to you, but I actually, well, at least, are we talking standard? PPR?
Let's go half PPR.
Half PPR, I mean, tags, I'm going to be honest, I had McCaffrey ahead of David Johnson coming into this week. I did my rankings before this week. I had him slightly ahead because I have been extremely, extremely worried about David Johnson. And again, I may be projecting myself when I'm asking you about whether or not you think that the switch to Byron Leftwich is going to be optimism for David Johnson, because I just cannot see him succeeding. He's been saved a little bit by the touchdowns that he's been getting other than last week. But other than that, I mean, it is terrible. I forgot, I think maybe James Coe or whoever put out the next gen stats, and they showed that graph, right? Where everything is right down the middle as opposed to what it used to be. That is just preposterous. And there was no way for me to think that it was going to get any different. This point, I think I'll probably take, and again, this is largely about me just blind, unbridled optimism, because I don't know, what Byron Leftwich is going to do, but I do think I will take David Johnson now going forward, probably like a spot or 2 higher than McCaffrey.
Yeah, I have Johnson 1 spot higher than McCaffrey, and I thought it was a good comparison, but I do have James White ahead of both of them.
Yeah, again, I think it's fair. He caught 2 more touchdowns today, I believe, right? And again, there's no Sony Michel. We don't know the injury. It looked bad. I believe he got carted. I don't know if he got carted off the field, but he got carted back from the sideline, which is not a good sign, of course. Okay, so anyway, let's move now off of Arizona because we really can't spend too much time talking about that team. But let's go to today's games. Yay! Chargers 20, Titans 19 in London. If you missed it, the Titans scored very close to the end of regulation, and they went for 2. They did a passing play that did not look like it had any chance of succeeding. But again, Chargers 20, Titans 19. We already talked about the fact that Melvin Gordon was inactive with a hamstring injury. Now the Chargers have a bye in week 8 because they played in London, of course. So, it makes sense for them to be cautious here with Gordon and not play him. It doesn't sound like this is a big deal, and he should come back in week 9. So I wouldn't panic and, for example, make a trade for, trade Alshon Jeffrey for Duke Johnson or anything like that. But I would sort of, just be cautious going forward. On the Chargers side, Phillip Rivers, his usual efficient self, 306 yards, but really 2 long touchdown passes. 1 to Tyrell Williams, their first play from scrimmage, 75-yard bomb, and 1 to Mike Williams, which looked to be just a blown coverage of 55-yard touchdown. I do want to ask you about Tyrell Williams, though. This is back-to-back huge games. Both games, oddly enough, exactly 118 yards receiving. He's got 3 touchdowns now. Are you buying into this at all?
I mean, he's a bye week fill-in for me. He has still yet to see more than 5 targets in a single game this year, which you can't sustain production on that volume. So, he needs the long touchdown to live up to it. Same thing with Mike Williams. Mike Williams hasn't seen many targets recently either. Phillip Rivers is spreading the ball around a lot. I do think it helps because Melvin Gordon, I know there's a lot of people that aren't going to be worried about it, but I kind of am. And the reason I am is I know they have their bye week, and I know he just took this game off, but he suffered the injury in Friday at practice. So we're talking about him having, 2 weeks to get ready from a hamstring injury. We've heard this before. We've heard it with Leonard Fournette. We've heard it with Dalvin Cook. And these 2 players have both had setbacks with the hamstring. And the Chargers, I don't know. I hope they don't rush him back, because if he's not 100%, locked in 100%, he should not be on the field, because it's just they shouldn't have him practicing. I've said this about the Vikings when Dalvin Cook suffered his hamstring injury. I remember them saying, oh, it was a slight tweak. And I think we talked about it in the show, or I talked about it with Bobby, I can't remember, but saying there's no such thing as a slight hamstring strain. It's either you strain your hamstring or you didn't. And it's we're seeing the soft tissue injuries on running backs have an effect. So if Melvin Gordon is forced to miss some time, Austin Eckler is clearly not the running back that Melvin Gordon is, and they're going to have to throw the ball a bit more. I do think that starts funneling to Keenan Allen, and I think he's the best buy low in all of fantasy football right now. But yeah, Tyrell Williams, if you can sell high on him, I am all about that, because again, he saw 4 targets today. He saw, I think it was 3 targets last week. He scored a couple times, but yeah, I'm selling Tyrell Williams if I can.
5, 3, 3, 5, 3, 4, 4. Those are Tyrell Williams' targets so far. There is not one over 5, as you said, and it's usually around 3 or 4. Look, it's a boomer bust. That's what he is. He catches these deep balls. He may catch them again, but it's a risk. I certainly wouldn't go buying into it. And yeah, Keenan Allen, we expressed optimism last week. He had 5 targets. He caught all of them this week for 72 yards. He seemed a little upset at one point on the sideline.
He was wide open in the end zone, and like he starts kicking the thing. I'm like, dude, come on. Like, have a conversation off to the sideline. None of that. Come on.
And they did talk about it on the sideline and looked fine after that. But again, we talked about it last week about how great his second half was last year and how most fantasy owners forgot about that just because he was so dominant overall. But again, yeah, I reiterate, as to you, obviously, not worried about Keenan Allen right now going forward. With Gordon, the only thing I will say just to make it a little more optimistic, and it's not necessarily that, is that they didn't declare him out necessarily even when they downgraded him, and he warmed up on the field to see if he could go. So that at least makes me optimistic that maybe it's not that bad. But I agree, hamstring, any soft tissue injury is worrisome because you never know. But with the bye, and my guess is it tightened on the flight, but with the bye, again, I feel relatively confident that he's going to, I mean, I can't say that, but I feel relatively good as a Gordon owner that he's going to play in week 9. If not, Austin Eckler certainly sees a bump in value. On the Titans side of the ball, look, this was a good spot to start Dion Lewis to the extent you had the intestinal fortitude to do it. You know, the Chargers have allowed the 3rd most receiving yards to opposing running backs, and that's basically what he did. He caught all 6 of his targets for 64 yards, but he also looked pretty good on the ground, 13 carries for 91 yards. Derrick Henry gets a short touchdown run. But is there any optimism, do you think, that Lewis can turn into kind of a borderline reliable starting option in standard leagues?
This is one of those 1 week things where I'm not really going to buy into just yet, because Dion Lewis did have a big week in week 1, and then he literally fell off the map. He fell off the face of the earth until week 7. So, I mean, it's kind of like, did he have a good week? Yeah. Did he look good? Yeah. But am I willing to say that he's a must play next week or anything like that? No, I'm not there with him. And they're on their bye, so obviously he's not going to be someone you want to play. But I have him as my number 36 running back for the rest of the year. I'm not excited about him. Like this entire offense, I'm not really excited about. They had an offensive lineman go down late in the game too. So I have no faith in the Tennessee offense right now.
Yeah, I think I had him 36 coming in. My guess is he is going to move up a little. Again, I don't do my rest of season rankings until Tuesday or maybe Wednesday, but I think he's going to go up a little bit just because I think their offense is stagnant and they need to do something to do it. And I think Lewis is an obvious sort of way to fix that. If they can kind of put it in and start using him out of the passing game, which we don't know why they really have been ignoring that part of it. And really also because what are their other options at this point? What about Corey Davis? I mean, 7 targets, 3 catches, 10 yards. I get that Casey Hayward was on him, but I mean, other than the one game against the Eagles, he has pretty much done nothing this season. Are you ready to move on from him out of curiosity? You got to do it, man. Rip the Band-Aid off.
I'm not willing to do it, and I'm going to explain to you why. So when I go through the rest of the season rankings, I start looking at like schedules and stuff like that, because that'll obviously impact on how I feel about a player for the rest of the year. Corey Davis, so here is a list of some of the cornerbacks he's faced this year. Xavier Howard, Jalen Ramsey, Tre'Davious White, Brandon Carr, and Casey Hayward. Those are 5 of his 7 matchups. Like, that's going to be hard on any wide receiver, especially when you're dealing with Marcus Mariota with an elbow issue, with Blaine Gabbert throwing you passes for part of that time. In his upcoming matchups, he's going to play against the Cowboys, the Patriots, who they have Stephon Gilmore, but he's not like a shutdown guy like that you truly have to avoid. Then he has the Colts, the Texans, and then the Jets on deck. So this is like the stretch in his schedule where I think you could buy him, and then maybe after that stretch, maybe you sell him, because like the targets are there, and I always want to chase targets for a wide receiver. He's clearly the number 1 in this offense. He has more than double the targets of any wide receiver on that team. There is no tight end. Yeah, I'm buying Corey Davis on the cheap. Like, granted, I'm never going to spend.
Okay, where is he on your rest of season rankings for wide receivers?
I have him at number 34.
Yep. No, I got to go lower, man. I mean, I had him at 36 coming in. I get what you're saying about the schedule. You're not wrong. And I love his talent. But at this point, and I've said this about a couple of players on this podcast, I'm willing to look back and say, you know what? I probably should have given him another look if I haven't seen it yet. At some point, I need to see it. And he's had some huge games. I love his talent. But, he had a terrible drop today. Not that that's that big a deal. I don't know, man. I can't do it at this point. Whether it's the offense, whether it's Mariota, or whether it's him, I just don't see it happening right now. He's outside my top 36. I cannot see starting him until I see 2 or 3 solid efforts in a row.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand the worrisome part of it, but it's like I look at the wide receivers I have around him in the rest of the season. It's like Amari Cooper. Do I feel great about him? Not really. Michael Crabtree, he's been extremely up and down in his production. Deshaun Jackson, do I think that's going to continue? I don't know. There's just so many names there. It's like Geronimo Allison. Do I put him ahead of Corey Davis? I mean, these are the guys in that range that I guess you can consider, but I would still put Davis there just because the consistent targets are there.
All right, that's fair. I'm willing to be wrong on him, but I can't imagine. I don't think I own him anywhere, and I'm glad because I can't think that I'm going to be in a position where I'm going to want to start him at any point in the next 3 or 4 weeks. Bucks 26, Browns 23. We talked about it a little bit. Browns' 4th overtime game, pretty exciting. Chandler Catanzaro hits a 59-yard field goal to win it. It was just a crazy day. That's really what it is. He hits a 59-yard field goal to win it, and Justin Tucker misses an extra point to lose the game. That's basically where we are today. I'm not sure it's a crazy game, but I'm not positive there are too many fantasy takeaways. It was kind of a weird game. On the Bucs side of the ball, Winston throws 52 times for 365 yards, but has 0 passing touchdowns. Winston does run for 1. Ronald Jones gets in the end zone on a rushing touchdown. Deshaun Jackson gets in on a rushing touchdown. Any takeaways from the Bucs side of the ball?
Yeah, there was some deep balls that Jameis Winston just missed on. Him and Deshaun Jackson were close, and it's like a recurring story with them where it's like last year it was the same thing with Jameis Winston, Deshaun Jackson, where it's like they just didn't connect on the deep ball a few times, and they just missed it where it could have been a huge play, and it just didn't pan out. So the Browns' defense is much better than people think they are. And that's the thing is like their secondary, have they had some lapses in coverage? Sure they have. But when their pass rush is able to get after the quarterback, it's always going to be difficult. And that was my concern about Jameis Winston this week is that his offensive line isn't very good. His tackle situation is one of the worst in the NFL. And when you have Myles Garrett and Larry Ogunjobi coming off, the edges at times, you have to those guys are going to be in his face all day. So I actually like the Browns defense this week. I talked about it in the DFS show. So I'm not surprised by this performance from Winston, but he's a quarterback I'm buying in fantasy though, because it's like you look for the recipe for with quarterbacks, what do you want? You want someone who's lacking a run game. That's clearly the case with Tampa Bay. You're looking for someone who's got a bad defense, clearly the case in Tampa Bay. And you're looking for a quarterback that ideally has a good wide receiver core. He has one of the best ones in the NFL. So I like Jameis Winston as a buy, where if you want to go out there and say, go get him from his owner, maybe his owner drops him after this game, whatever the case is, I think Jameis Winston is almost an every week starter.
Where do you have him out of curiosity now that you've updated your rest of season rankings?
I have Jameis Winston as my number 12 quarterback going forward.
Interesting. I mean, Tags, everything you're saying, I completely agree with, but I have him 8th for basically those reasons. I mean, I get that there are, again, we talk about this all the time, so I don't want to belabor the point. But when you get to that range, you're pretty much, it's not a huge difference, between the number 8 and the number 12 or even the number 14, frankly, at that range. But I agree. If somebody does not, I've seen him, on the waiver wire, frankly, in a league or two. He's definitely an ad. If you have anything other than a lockdown top 6, maybe top 7 quarterback, I'm adding him. And I agree. I would not be worried about, he didn't look great in this game, but I would not be worried about it. And I agree that he is a buy. On the Browns side of the ball, Nick Chubb gets his opportunity, and he looks good. 18 carries for 80 yards and the touchdown. And for the most part, this game went kind of as we expected for the Browns offense. Baker Mayfield threw 2 touchdowns. One goes to Jarvis Landry, who we were talking about as somebody who was going to bounce back. And one goes to David Njoku, your boy. And we've kind of been stressing that he is now in line for a good run of performances based on the defenses that he's going up against.
Yeah, David Njoku is a boss, and it's fun watching him play football, man. The dude's an athletic freak, and I loved him coming out. Him and O.J. Howard were the number 1 and number 2 prospects, so to see O.J. Howard and him going at it in this game, this is a fun game to watch, man. Baker started out the game really slow. Their offense just wasn't clicking, and then something happened where it's just they turned it on, and all of a sudden they started playing, and I really wanted them to get another shot in overtime. I was hoping that Catanzaro missed that 59-yard field goal, and it was funny. I don't know if you got to see it, Baker Mayfield's reaction on the sideline.
Oh, I did. It was great. They were focusing right in on him. He just looked in total disbelief.
My wife looked at me and she goes, why is he surprised that an NFL kicker made a field goal? And I was like, well, it was a 59-yarder. She's like, I know, but he looks at it like our 2-year-old son walked on the field and kicked a field goal.
Also, didn't he miss one earlier in overtime? A shorter one? Am I making that up? I was trying to watch that game. I may be wrong, but I thought he missed one.
I try and tune out for the kickers, but yes, he did go 2 of 3 in field field goal attempts, so it's possible that he did. But I try and tune out kickers whenever I can.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, the Browns offense, they do have a good stretch of schedule coming up. I think that Baker Mayfield can be on the streaming radar again next week. They're going to be playing in Pittsburgh. And if you know anything about Pittsburgh, they've been stopping the run really well. And it's going to be a high-scoring game while they're in Pittsburgh. So I think Baker is on the starting radar again. But the big news for me in this one is that Duke Johnson did not see an increased role even after trading Carlos Hyde. He saw Baker threw the ball 34 times. He saw 4 targets. He carried the ball 1 time. He was announced as the starter. It didn't pan out that way. Nick Chubb ended up 18 carries to the 1 for Duke. So it seems like Nick Chubb clearly walked right in to the Carlos Hyde role and kind of just took that over. And he played better than Carlos Hyde has kind of all year.
Yeah, no, I for whatever reason, I wasn't optimistic that it was going to be much for Duke Johnson, just because it wasn't as if it was the reason Duke Johnson is not getting work is because Nick Chubb is taking it away from him when Carlos Hyde was there. It was just Duke Johnson's not getting work. And they talk about how Duke Johnson's going to get more work, and then Duke Johnson does not get more work. And I think that's just what we're looking at. Unless Hugh Jackson gets fired, in which case all bets are off. You know me, I'm suddenly on the train of optimism whenever a coach gets fired at this point. But I agree. I think this is what it's going to look like so long as Jackson's there. I think it's going to be Chubb overall, and I think Johnson's going to get, 4 to 5 touches a game. So if you were adding him with the hope that he was going to turn into something, I really don't think it's going to happen. So Tags, before we keep going, my wife, and this was something I thought you'd be interested in, my wife recently ran the Chicago Marathon right by you. And so I got her this awesome present, right? I was really excited. I got her this sort of laser engraved map of the whole thing with the route. Or with the route, sorry, I know you yell at me, with the laser engraved thing with her time and her name and the date, and it's awesome. So we were talking about where are we going to put it in the house, right? And I said, well, you should probably put it somewhere accessible in case there's like a fire or an alien invasion and we got to get out of the house really quick. We want to make sure we grab it. And she legit said to me, if there is a fire or an alien invasion, I am taking the mattress and I'm not all that concerned about whatever else is left here. So that is too mean, but I cannot blame her because like you, we have a Lisa mattress. Now, a quality night's sleep helps you recover from distractions faster, prevents burnout, make better decisions, improve your memory, and overall make fewer mistakes. And to design a better mattress, Lisa leveraged 30 plus years of experience and hundreds of hours of testing to develop the perfect mattress for all body shapes and sleeping styles. Now look, the fact that it's the most comfortable mattress you'll ever sleep on is enough, but there is more. Lisa's mission is to provide a better night's sleep for everybody. So they have this awesome thing called the 110 program. They donate 1 mattress for every 10 they sell. That's more than 26,000 mattresses and counting. Lisa strives to leave the world better than they found it, but that doesn't stop with mattress donations. Together with the Arbor Day Foundation, Lisa plants 1 tree for every mattress they sell, and they're committed to planting 1 million trees by 2025. And with our offer code, you can get $160 off a Lisa mattress. Just go to lisa.com/fantasypros. That's LEESA.com/fantasypros. All right, Tags, moving on. Lions 32, Dolphins 21. As we talked about, Kerryon Johnson was finally free. 19 carries for 158 yards, plus 2 catches for 21 yards. And of course, on his big breakout day, he finally gets that goal line carry and gets into the end zone, right? No, that's not what we're doing. LeGarrette Blount, of course, gets the goal line carry, gets the touchdown. Admittedly, just so I don't sound too mean, LeGarrette Blount ran well today. 10 carries for 50 yards. There is no end zone for Kerryon Johnson, but again, we are both excited about him. Now, you talked about him at the beginning, so I am just going to ask you again the same way I did earlier. X player versus Y player. Rest of season. Ready? Kerryon Johnson versus Nick Chubb.
Kerryon by a smidge.
Kerryon Johnson versus David Johnson.
David Johnson.
Okay, you didn't hesitate there. I wanted to see how high I can push you, because then you were really excited right there. I agree with that. He's right around the Chubb, which is, what is that, a mid-range RB2? Is that around where he is?
Yeah, mid to high-end RB2. The thing is like, what you have to worry about with Kerryon is like him, like openly admitted himself. He said that I'm not going to be a workhorse. Like I belong in a timeshare. Like the dude actually says it over and over. He said it this preseason. He said it the other week. And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, this guy doesn't want to be like the guy. He really doesn't. And like what people should know about today's performance is that he did play more snaps because Theo Riddick was inactive. That's like an important takeaway here, because I think that his value is going to be inflated. And I played him in a lot of DFS lineups because I knew that. But to know that he only, he saw 3 targets, so it wasn't like a big thing, but he was on the field for like more often. He is losing goal line carries to LeGarrette Blount. So I think that the love might get out of control. Whereas like if some people are like, oh, hey, I will give you whatever you want for Kerryon Johnson. Like, what do you want? I mean, I would go out there and if I can get David Johnson for him, I would do that because again, Kerryon's not going to be the workhorse running back. He's not getting goal line carries. And there's some worrisome signs here, but it's more about the state of the running back position in general.
No, I agree with that completely. And again, LeGarrette Blount, I mean, he got 10 carries today. He's going to be involved. Always he's going to be involved on the goal line. But as a reliable RB2, without question, I'm totally buying that at this point. I don't buy him as an RB1 guaranteed because he's just not going to get the work for it. But I agree, Theo Riddick is a good point. Amir Abdullah did not get the work that Theo Riddick would have. So it certainly helped Kerryon Johnson today. But he is a reliable guy going forward, and I am very excited that he is finally released. On the passing side of the game for the Lions, I mean, look, Michael Roberts' mother is probably really happy right now, right? Because I guarantee you she's the only person who started him on her fantasy team. Now, if you don't know who that is, it is the backup tight end for the Lions who caught 2 touchdowns today. And I will let Tags and Bobby advise you on the appropriate fab bid for a dude who has 4 catches on the season. But for the rest of the guys who we were all actually relying on, it was just a quiet day for all the wide receivers. Kenny Golladay did have an awesome touchdown catch, called back by a penalty. But, I mean, just kind of a quiet, mad day for all of them, but nothing to worry about with any of them, right? You agree with that?
No, not really. I mean, the running game was just getting it done for them. They didn't have to throw all that much. I think Stafford ended with like 22 attempts maybe. It was a low-volume game for them. Again, Golladay did score a touchdown. He's the receiver to own there. Like, I was slow to come around to it at the beginning of the year. I'm like, I want to see it more often, but Golladay is clearly the go-to guy there. Golden Tate had a tough matchup with Minkah Fitzpatrick, their slot cornerback. He's been like the best slot cornerback in the game this year when he plays there. So he did a good job on him again, even though Golden Tate did drop a potential touchdown, and Marvin Jones is back to it's like touchdown or bust. So nothing new from him. So yeah, as for the pass catchers, like you're not going to see Stafford throw the ball 22 times very often. So I mean, I wouldn't be too concerned about him.
Yep, I agree with that completely. I'm willing just to kind of write it off for the passing game because they just didn't need it. They were in control for pretty much the whole game. On the Dolphins side of the ball, there's kind of a lot to talk about with the wide receivers, but none of them is particularly fantasy relevant. But Albert Wilson looked to be on his way to another big game early. He had 3 catches, but he left with what is now called a hip injury. It was originally a knee injury. They do have a Thursday night game this week against the Texans, so it's a little difficult to be optimistic about his availability going forward. Kenny Stills, who caught his 1 5-yard touchdown catch, also I believe was dealing with a shoulder issue. And Davante Parker was apparently a healthy scratch. Tags, I don't know if you saw this, his agent has come out kind of blasting. So over under Tags 6 days that Davante Parker is on the Dolphins.
Oh, Parker's going to be traded for sure. Like that's happening. It's just a matter of when. I think they kept him inactive to make sure he stayed healthy. Like that's the thing. He's healthy. They have him healthy. They're looking reportedly from Ian Rappaport. He said they're looking for a 3rd round pick for him. I think that's doable, but I don't think they're going to get it. I think they can get like a 4th for him. He's still a young receiver. He's finishing up his rookie deal. Like he needs to land on a new team. He needs a fresh start. It's kind of like Jay Ajayi wore out his act in Miami, and they weren't hesitant to trade him. So I don't think they'll be hesitant to trade Davante Parker. So he's someone that I did drop on a few teams in a few deeper leagues where it's like he was just sitting there on the bench just waiting to potentially give me something. I did drop him, and I felt kind of bad about it because I feel like he's going to wind up with a team like the Cowboys, and all of a sudden he's going to get targets and he's going to be a fantasy relevant wide receiver. But again, I can't depend on that. It's possible that he goes to the Bills. I don't know.
Personally, I would think it would be pretty difficult, and I think we've seen this before for a receiver to come over in the middle of the season and pick up the playbook and suddenly be good. I mean, Josh Gordon obviously is having, success doing that with the Patriots, although he's had a little time to kind of get acclimated. But at this point, it's going to be week 8 by the time he goes. So I really, if you're considering dropping Davante Parker, I wouldn't be too worried about it going forward. Is this enough? Is Kenyon Drake, is this enough? I mean, he gets just 6 carries, of course, so it's probably not enough. He does get 72 yards, including a 54-yard touchdown run. Is this enough for Adam Gase to finally understand that he needs to get Kenyon Drake the ball more?
I mean, he has to, and that's the thing is, like, looking at it, he saw 8 targets. It led the team, like, all wide receivers, all tight ends. He led the team in targets, and this going back the other week, it was like 11 targets. So they're clearly involving him more in the passing game, and knowing that that Wilson's dinged up, knowing that Davante Parker might be traded, knowing that Kenny Stills ran into a security guard, which is what caused the shoulder injury. There's like a lot of reasons to think that Kenyon Drake is going to be involved one way or the other. And as we know, in fantasy football, targets are worth more than carries. So if he's going to be seeing, 8 to 12 targets per game, yeah, you definitely want to play him. So he's moving up my board as we speak. And the thing is Frank Gore, it's a great story. I get it. And he has looked good. And, it finally got to the point where everybody wanted to trust him to put him in there as an RB3. And then he goes, 10 carries for 29 yards against the pitiful Lions defense. So It's natural, man. His body is going to wear out at some point. It might be getting to that point. We saw it towards the end of the Bears game where he just looked like he was dead. Kenyon Drake, yeah, he's definitely on the rise up, and we always knew the talent was there. It was just opportunity needed to meet that talent, and I think we're starting to get there.
Okay, Patriots 38, Bears 31. Now, there's a lot to discuss here, and you and Bobby will undoubtedly spend 20 minutes tomorrow discussing the Hail Mary that was caught by Kevin White at the 1-yard line, because it basically involves both of you to the largest extent possible, but let's just go through it quickly. We've talked a lot about the Patriots already, Rob. Gronkowski missed the game with a back injury. This one does sound minor, and it does sound precautionary, and they play on Monday night against Buffalo, and it sounds like he'll be back. We talked about Sony Michel and the running back situation, and frankly, all the pass catchers at this point. Out of curiosity, if Sony Michel is out for a long time, which it looked like he would be, again, we do not know anything at this point, what do you think happens with the running back situation? Is it entirely ignored? Does Barner become somebody who's going to be relevant in fantasy leagues?
I could see them picking up Mike Gillislee, just put someone back on the map. He's out there as a free agent right now, so they could sign him. I do think they bring in someone else. If Sony's going to miss more than a week or two, then I definitely think they go out and they snag someone. They might even trade for someone, like maybe like an Amir Abdullah, just to bring in another body to get some carries in the offense. I don't know, man. I really hope that's not the case, because Sony Michel he's started to come into his own, and he was like another reliable RB1 every single week, and he got off to that start that we thought he would. You know, he had 4 carries for 22 yards. He even caught a screen pass for 13 yards, and I think he touched the ball on 4 of the first 5 plays. Like it was on the first drive, I think he got hurt when he fumbled. It might have been the second drive. But like he was doing some work. So it's something to pay attention to. I don't think that Kenjon Barner is going to become a thing. I really don't think so. I think that they would definitely add a free agent body. So I'm not running to the waiver wire to grab him or anything.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, hopefully Sony Michel is okay. It looked bad, but you never know. You do have plenty of times where things look bad and they turn out to be nothing. So again, but hopefully by the time you're listening to this, there's more information. On the Bears side of the ball, Mitch Trubisky definitely comes through as the streamer. He has the big day, throwing for 333 yards, rushing for 81 yards, 3 total touchdowns. Jordan Howard finds the end zone. Tariq Cohen finds the end zone. Trey Burton finds the end zone. What do you want to take away here from your boys?
Mitch Trubisky was bad. And I know he's like, I want to say I saw something, and I don't know if it still stands this way, but that he was the number 1 fantasy quarterback of the week. And if you watch that game, you came away being like, how? That's the best way to say it. And I've been saying it for a long time now. I said it in the primer. I said it in my buy-sell piece. Like I said that Trubisky's stats don't match his performance on the field. And it was like at an all-time bad this week. Like he looked terrible. Unless a wide receiver had, like 5 yards of separation, he wasn't hitting his targets. He threw multiple interceptions that should have been intercepted, but they weren't. They were dropped. And then the 2 interceptions that he had, one was on a 50-50 ball, like he was throwing at Josh Bellamy. There was just a lot of things in that game that I think Trubisky is one of the sell highs in football. The Bears their defense has allowed 69 points over the last 2 weeks. That's something that's not going to happen over a span of 2 weeks, probably again the rest of the season. So, Trubisky throwing the ball 50 times, that made up for a very lackluster performance. I know he got a lot done on the ground. Rushing the ball, he did fantastic. But
that one run was kind of preposterous. Frankly, he looked like he was going out of bounds. He just sort of stopped and then turned and was down at the 1. It was an amazing run.
Then the touchdown run, they were on the...
Oh, yes. The touchdown run was better. Forget it. Yes, the touchdown run was better, actually.
They were on like the 20-yard line, and like he ran back to the 30, escaped a sack, and then ran all the way back. He ran a total of 72 yards on a 21-yard touchdown run. It was insane. It was crazy, but it was a good play on his part. But either way, Allen Robinson, there's a lot of people asking me, Mike, I'm getting close to dropping Allen Robinson. If you want to drop someone, don't tell me that you're on the risk of doing it. If you want to do it, then do it. It's your team. But like my take on Robinson is that he was dealing with an injury that had him as a game time decision. It's a groin injury, so it's a soft tissue one. And when you have someone like that, there's risk putting him in the lineup. And then on top of that, he was going up against Stephon Gilmore, which is a tough matchup. So the Bears ended up pulling him late in that game. He didn't play. I don't think he even ran a snap on their final couple drives. So Allen Robinson not performing, it doesn't surprise me. They don't have a bye week. They already passed that point in the season. So you might see him rested for a week or two in order to get that right. Anthony Miller, he had separation a couple times, man, and Trubisky just missed him. He was one of my favorite sleeper plays this week where I felt like, man, and it could have been a really big game for him had Trubisky played well. So the Bears offense is a little bit hit or miss, but Josh Gordon, as I mentioned, if you can get him in a trade right now, if someone's thinking that they're being sly by I'm going to sell high on Josh Gordon, this is the time to buy him.
Yeah, for sure. 4 catches for 100 yards. He looks great. Do you think he's the most valuable, real quick, because I do want to move on, do you think he's the most valuable wide receiver, forget about Gronk, wide receiver in standard leagues for for the Patriots.
It's close, man. Him and Edelman are very close. Like, Edelman isn't going to score a touchdown every week. He's got 2 touchdowns the last 2 weeks, whereas Gordon doesn't have any. That's going to flip at some point. It's really close. I think I have them like right next to each other in my rest of season rankings.
I think I take Gordon over him, frankly, in standard leagues. PPR or even half-point PPR, I take Edelman. But at this point, I'm fully buying in. So I agree with you. If you can acquire him, if he's somehow undervalued still at this point, I definitely do it. Texans 20, Jaguars 7. Let's briefly touch on the Jaguars. The news, of course, Leonard Fournette was inactive. Carlos Hyde, who was traded, was inactive. But the big news is that Blake Bortles was finally benched. I was thinking about this while watching the game. I thought of what you said. Once the Texans went up 13-0, you knew that the Jaguars couldn't come back. There was just no chance. It didn't have to be 20. It was 13-0, and you were like, no, this is terrible. Bortles was terrible, 6 for 12 for 61 yards. He did have 30 yards rushing. Let me ask you something. Is Blake Bortles going to start again for the Jaguars?
Yeah, he's going to. This was his warning. This was like, hey, we're not going to stand for your crap. You need to play better. We're going to put in Kessler right now. And Kessler, the interception that he threw was off TJ Yeldon's hands, so it wasn't like a direct interception. It was just like a deflected ball. It wasn't the greatest pass, but it was deflected, so it wasn't necessarily a direct interception. Bortles also fumbled the ball twice. Like he lost 2 fumbles in that game, and that's what ultimately got him benched. And they just felt like there's no coming back with Blake Bortles. We need to go to someone else, and they did that, and they got a little juice from Kessler. He threw a touchdown to TJ Yeldon, which was an impressive one-handed catch by Yeldon, but it was just ugly, man. And this defense, you could just tell, like, again, it was once they went down, you just saw things like Jalen Ramsey got schooled by DeAndre Hopkins on the touchdown. Like, it was just nasty. Like, he did him like he looked like a backup cornerback was trying to go up against one of the game's elite. And it was like, dude, I think DeAndre Hopkins actually left-handed smacked him to the head as he like went inside on his slant and was just like, get out of my way. And he did, and he caught a touchdown. So it was this defense does not look good. It just feels like the confidence that this Jaguars team had just went away. It's gone, and they need to get it back.
And unfortunately, they face the Eagles next week, so that is not a great matchup on either side of the ball. So I wouldn't be too optimistic either side. But yeah, they just looked kind of deflated, the defense, but the offense has nothing going at this point. And you're not relying on any Jaguars wide receiver, certainly not. You just can't, any of them, frankly. You don't know which one it will be, if it ever will be one, and you certainly don't want to go to bat with that. On the Texans side of the ball, Kiki QT leaves the game early with a hamstring injury. They do have a Thursday night game, and I believe Adam Schefter already tweeted out that he's going to miss that game. So if you are relying on Kiki QT, you need to make other arrangements for Week 8. We talked about Deshaun Watson. We talked about the amazing DeAndre Hopkins move that he put on Jalen Ramsey, making him look silly. So let's talk about Lamar Miller. There is no one who bashes the fantasy prospects of Lamar Miller as much as I do. But he really came through today. I mean, it looked like a tough matchup, but he gains 100 yards on 22 carries with the touchdown. Just one catch. It was a big thing for him. We both had him 36th before this game. Deonta Foreman's coming back. Alfred Blue would begin to cut in. But do you think that this game is enough to kind of cement him as a guy who's closer to the RB2 range than the RB3 range, or what?
No. I told someone before today's game that I wouldn't trust Lamar Miller at all. Like, I had him outside my top 40 running backs for the week, and I felt fine with it. Like, if I didn't have Lamar Miller in my lineup this week, I don't own him in any leagues, but if I did and I didn't play him, I wouldn't be upset about this. Like, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, how could I have not seen this coming? There was nothing you could have seen coming about this. Deontay Foreman, he's someone that it's like, if you could find someone in your league who's getting hyped on him and thinks he's going to return and take some sort of job, like, sell him right now. Like, for anything you possibly get. If you can get Traquan Smith for Deontay Foreman, do it. Because Foreman's not coming back and doing anything. He's not a pass-catching running back. He's a 1-2 down back that's running behind a terrible offensive line. Lamar Miller, any running back, when you give him 20-plus touches continually over and over, eventually he's going to have a good game. It just so happens it was against the Jags, so people are going to think more of it. I'm not one to do that. Lamar Miller is staying at number 36 in my rest of season rankings, and I would rather have someone like Chris Carson on my team.
Yep. If you can deal him for basically anything above that sort of range, I would do it in a heartbeat. I am one of those individuals who had Lamar Miller and benched him, and I do not feel bad about it. Probably because it didn't wind up mattering in my matchup, but still, I really would not have felt bad about it because there's just no way at this point that you can rely on him. Panthers 21, Eagles 17. I think we've pretty much covered the Panthers at this point because we talked about them a lot. But on the Eagles side of the ball, Corey Clement, I mean, he really came crashing back down to earth. 8 carries for 6 yards, just 2 catches for 16 yards. He is outgained and outtouched by Wendell Smallwood. True or false, the best Eagles running back going forward is not currently on the roster?
That's possible. Very possible.
I go true, man. I don't know who it's going to be at this point because LaShawn McCoy left with an injury, and I don't know how serious that is. I don't know if it could be Le'Veon Bell. I'm still holding out hope. But in the end, I do not think that Corey Clement or Wendell Smallwood is the most valuable Eagles running back going forward.
Yeah, I didn't think this was a good matchup. Someone asked me about Clement on the live stream this morning, and I said that it wasn't a great matchup for any of the Eagles running backs. Like looking at their schedule and who they've played against Saquon, they've played against Ezekiel Elliott, Tevin Coleman, Adrian Peterson. They had a tough schedule, and it's like they hadn't allowed much through the air. Saquon had 2 receiving touchdowns, yes, but outside of him, there wasn't a receiver that had more than 25 yards through the air. So it was just like, it wasn't a good matchup for him. He hasn't been getting a whole bunch of touches on the ground. They were mixing in Josh Adams and Wendell Smallwood. So it's going to continue to be that. Clement, he's still the one that I would most want to own on that team going forward as it currently sits. But I do think that they should add a body because they currently don't have a run game.
Yeah, they're adding a body. I can almost guarantee it. They did it last year with, Ajayi. I really think, and again, last week was sort of a test for Clement, I think, and he passed with flying colors. But I think this effort really is going to make them work, especially considering that they blew the big lead, where if they had sort of a more effective run game, they might have been able to run out the clock a little bit.
They were up 17-0 in this game, I think, at one point.
I know. Into the fourth quarter, Tags. I mean, they were up 17-0 going into the fourth quarter. Carolina scored all 21 points in the fourth quarter. So that's a big loss. So I do think that they will make a trade. So I guess the big takeaway from that is, regardless of the performance, if you do have Clement or you do have Smallwood, I personally, I would not expect them to kind of be reliable running backs going forward because I do think somebody else is going to come in. Colts 37, Bills 5. The Bills got a safety on a bad snap, just in case you thought I misspoke on the score. Briefly on the Bills, because I have an obligation to speak about every team that plays. LaShawn McCoy left almost immediately, as we talked about, with a head injury. I didn't actually hear it called a concussion, but I assume...
That's what I'm assuming. They did say head injury, and it looked like it was an ankle injury when the play actually happened. I don't know. It was just really odd, the whole thing surrounding it, but they're calling it a head injury. So and when they say head injury, it's got to be concussion.
Yeah, so obviously we don't know anything about that. We'll see. They have an extra day because they host the Patriots on Monday Night Football. And instead, Chris Ivory gained 81 yards on 16 carries, but nobody's really going to be excited about anyone on the Bills, no matter what, certainly not with Derek Anderson at the helm. On the Colts side of the ball, we've talked about a lot. We talked about Luck. We've talked about Mack. But T.Y. Hilton with a nice return. He had a tough matchup. He drew, Tre'Davious White. He was held to just 4 catches, just 25 yards, but he does find the end zone twice. Looked healthy. What do you think? Borderline wide receiver 1 going forward, back to where we thought he would be?
Yeah, knowing how much Luck is throwing the ball, knowing that the defense will allow points. Their run game, as much as Marlon Mack looked good today, guys, like it was still Buffalo, and Buffalo had been playing better as of late, and I've been standing up for them in a lot of things because a lot of people have asked me, they're playing Buffalo, how can you not start? I'm like, Buffalo's been really good lately, so what the Colts did today was actually impressive, but Marlon Mack's not going to do that every single week. They're going to have to get back to throwing the ball. Andrew Luck is not going to throw the ball 23 times a week. So T.Y. Hilton in every game outside of this one, but coming into this one, in every full healthy game that he had played, he had seen at least 8 targets. So, and he's like the type of player who only needs one play to hit value. So yeah, he's definitely in the top 15 wide receivers for the rest of the season for me.
Could not agree more. And P.S. in Week 8, they face the Raiders. So go ahead and start all your Colts, no matter who they are. You will have a fun time. Vikings 37, Jets 17. Adam Thielen, 110 yards and a touchdown. 7th consecutive game with 100 yards receiving. First time since 2014. Pretty impressive, especially given that today it was borderline hurricane winds over there. It was really windy. Clearly the passing game kind of struggled a little bit. Other than that, Latavius Murray, again, with another big day, mainly in the second half. He scores twice. He's 69 yards on 15 carries. So long as Dalvin Cook is out, Murray's a solid RB2 even against the Saints next week. You agree with that?
Oh, against the Saints, probably not. I mean, I'm going to have him in RB3 territory for sure. So the Saints, outside of Saquon Barkley, they have not allowed a running back 13 PPR points this year.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough matchup, but I haven't done my rankings yet, obviously, but I do think that he's going to be in an RB2 range.
There's 4 teams on bye, so it's possible he sneaks in there, but he would be definitely low end RB2, high end RB3.
Yeah, that's fair. But he certainly is making the most of his opportunities at this point. And who knows when Dalvin Cook's going to come back. He practices and he looks good, and then you're like, no, he's not going. Let's talk briefly about Stephon Diggs, though. He does have 14 targets, but his 8 receptions go for only 33 yards. Are you still thinking about him as a borderline wide receiver 1 going forward?
Yeah, I'm slowly moving him down. I actually just moved him down to number wide receiver 16. So like I'm slowly backing away because it's like Adam Thielen's the guy there. Like he is the one. And Stephon Diggs, like both Thielen and Diggs were struggling to get much separation today, which was really weird because the Jets, like the cornerback situation they have there, it should have been like an easy day for them. Now, granted, the wins probably affected the passing game more than we could even think, but it seemed like every single time that Diggs was getting targeted, there was a defender on his back, and even Adam Thielen on his long touchdown catch, that defender was within a yard of him. Like it was a good catch, it was a great throw. But yeah, I mean, eventually we have to say if you're in wide receiver 1 territory, you're like an every week like performer, and Stephon Diggs just hasn't been.
Yep, I agree with that. And Thielen is the guy, and he's
the dude, man. That guy is just on fire.
He's awesome. Yeah, I was surprised, frankly, the Jets defense. I mean, they did what they could, down Kerryon Johnson and Buster Screen and Marcus May, but it wasn't really all that much of a contest. On the Jets' offensive side of the ball, Bilal Powell left the game with a neck injury. I haven't heard anything about the severity of that one yet. Tags, have you?
I have not heard anything about it, no.
So Isaiah Crowell gets the bulk of the work. He predictably does nothing with it. 11 carries for 29 yards plus 1 catch for 21 yards. I don't really think there's all that much to say here about the Jets. With Quincy Enunwa out, I kind of thought Jermaine Kearse might do something with Xavier Rhodes probably on Robbie Anderson, but he did not have a catch. Anything you want to say about the Jets, or do you want to just move on?
Well, yeah, Jermaine Kearse. So I'm curious to go back and look at this because I haven't been able to look at like the alignment for the wide receivers of the Jets. But my concern coming into this game, I talked about it in the live stream. And again, there's some things that I'll say earlier in the week that might not translate to later in the week. So I talked about Jermaine Kearse in the waiver wire show, saying he should be a high floor like receiver this week, considering the targets that he should be in line for playing the slot. But once we found out that Terrell Pryor was cut from the team, then they signed Deontay Burnett. It kind of like the stars were aligning, saying that he was going to have to play more on the perimeter than in the slot because Burnett is strictly a slot receiver. He's a very small dude. He played slot at USC. There's no reason he's going to play on the perimeter in the NFL. So everything aligned. So it was kind of like saying, okay, Kearse might not see all those targets that we thought he would because, you know, Sam Darnold has fell in love with that slot receiver. So to see Andre Roberts and Burnett combined for 8 targets and then for Jermaine Kearse to see 2, I'm guessing when I go and I'm able to actually go and look at that I'm going to see that Jermaine Kearse didn't play the slot as much as he has the last couple weeks, and that led to his production being not nil, I should say. But yeah, it's definitely disappointing, but I think there were some factors we probably could have seen this coming.
Yeah, well, either way, you're certainly not going to be excited about Jermaine Kearse going forward, right?
That's for sure. Right?
Yeah, for sure. And especially, you know, they go up against the Bears next week, which will be fun for us, buddy, on the Sunday night podcast. All right, Saints 24, Ravens 23. We talked about it was just ending as we came on with Justin Tucker missing the kick. On the Saints side of the ball, Ted Ginn is on IR, which opened up a spot. Traquan Smith, 3 catches for 44 yards, not bad. Alvin Kamara, though, leads the team in rush attempts, 17 for 64, plus the touchdown. Mark Ingram just 12 for 32. Anything you want to say on the Saints side of the ball?
No, it was always going to be a tough game for the running backs there. It was going to be a tough game for the receivers going into Baltimore. The cornerbacks for Baltimore are just really friggin' good. So to see Michael Thomas walk away with 69 yards and a touchdown, obviously that's something. Ben Watson putting up 43 yards and a touchdown against his old team. Traquan Smith is like a must-add, guys. If you guys are listening now and like for whatever reason your league allows pickups right now, or if you have to go to the waiver wire or whatever, Traquan Smith only had 33 yards, so nobody's going to be excited about that. But believe me when I say the matchup was brutal, and he's going to have better weeks. Like Traquan Smith is a must-add right now.
Yeah, for sure. Cameron Meredith, I assume he was active for this game, right? Because I don't see that he got a target at all.
Yeah, that was. I don't know what's going on there, man.
Yeah,
no idea.
Me neither. Me neither. Traquan Smith is the dude, so he's definitely an ad. I agree. He should really, at this point, not be out there in any leagues just for the potential, so I would not be concerned about his performance here. On the Ravens side of the ball, John Brown, our dude, 7 targets, 7 catches, 134 yards, and the touchdowns, which is it's just on a personal level, putting aside sort of the fantasy hat, it's just great to see because he's a good dude and he's been struggling with injury for his whole career pretty much. So it's really great to see him overcome that. Lamar Jackson gets, a rushing touchdown, which takes away any fantasy goodness. And I really wish that the Ravens would stop with the fullback handoff with Buck Allen, which is really annoying when you see Alex Collins actually look like he might get a goal line carry. But anything you want to take away here from the Ravens side of the ball?
Willie Snead was really disappointing. He had multiple drops today. The matchup couldn't have been better, and he has another good matchup next week. But yeah, he was the only takeaway from here is like John Brown obviously looked good, and that was another thing I talked about in the live stream, saying that like New Orleans had a really unique scenario where they had to choose who Marshawn Lattimore was going to cover, and it made sense for him to cover Crabtree, a bigger physical wide receiver. So they did stick him on Crabtree, and then John Brown made him pay because Ken Crawley's terrible in coverage. Like, he's just not very good. So John Brown abused him all day long. That's why he caught all 7 of his targets for 134 yards. But yeah, the tight end situation there is not getting any clearer with Hayden Hurst, Mark Andrews, Nick Boyle, Max Williams. I know last week all of them played snaps. They all ran routes, and it's just like, it's ugly. So this team is just like, it's hard to predict them week over week. So I think John Brown and Michael Crabtree are the only ones you can semi-trust.
Yep, I think that's a totally fair point, and I'm inclined to agree. Redskins 20, Cowboys 17. This was going on as we were doing this podcast, and I believe the Cowboys missed a kick to tie the game right at the end of regulation.
Serves him right.
Adrian Peterson carries the load, 24 carries for 99 yards. He looks good, dude. I mean, he really does. I keep waiting for this ride to end, but I mean, I'm not sure it's going to unless he succumbs to injury, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's the thing. When Chris Thompson was out, I figured he'd be involved more in the passing game, but he only caught 1 ball. But yeah, there was moments in that game where I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, Adrian Peterson's showing more burst than like Tevin Coleman this year. And like, I don't know what's happening when I'm watching it. But it's fun to watch Adrian Peterson still play at his age. I thought that as the year went on, I thought we'd start to see him break down a little bit, and it's still possible. I mean, we're only 7 weeks in, but at the same time, he looked better than ever today. Today, he just looked mobile. He looked quick against the Dallas run defense that is playing really well. They got Sean Lee back this week. On top of that, Washington didn't have any pass catchers like active for this game. Like,
nobody to catch the ball at all, and everybody knows they're going to run, and they still couldn't stop them.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, Jordan Reed saw 4 targets.
Gosh, we could spend 2 hours on Jordan Reed, frankly, but we'd be here forever. So I don't want to do that necessarily, but I don't know. I mean, he does lead the team in receiving by a yard, I believe, but really he has 43 yards. He ties with Capri Bibbs. Josh Doxson has 42 yards, but you can't at this point rely on any pass catcher. And I did notice that you had him pretty high rest of season, and I keep waiting for it, but I've dropped him pretty significantly in my rest of season tight end rankings because for whatever reason they're just not going to him. But again, that's something that we can probably talk about over the next week. With the Cowboys 17 points, Ezekiel Elliott 15 carries for 33 yards. Is the Redskins defense vastly underrated at this point?
Yes and no. They've been really hit or miss, and it's been that way through with their run defense. It's been that way with their secondary. Like, there's weeks where it's like, man, you guys have looked really good. Then there's weeks where it's like against Breeze, where it's like, what are you guys doing? Did you guys forget that you guys are playing against Drew Brees? Like, and then there's weeks like this where it's just like they shut down Ezekiel Elliott, and they are a team that has yet to allow a running back more than 61 yards on the ground. So it was going to be a tougher matchup, but I figured Zeke. I figured if there was anybody that was going to do it, it's going to be him. But no, they just weren't able to generate anything on the ground today.
Yeah, just one of those days they really couldn't do anything. Michael Gallup catches a touchdown, but really, he's not somebody who you really want to consider on the fantasy radar at this point, is he? Or does this change your mind at all?
I was watching that game, and the commentators, I can't remember who it was that was calling that game. It was Tony Romo, and Nance had said something about that he was talking to Dak this week, and he said basically that Michael Gallup started to get it. Like, this could have been a breakout week for Gallup. So to see him get 5 targets, catch 8, have 81 yards and a touchdown, that's always a good sign, right? Like, we want to see him start getting targets. He has, and I've mentioned this in the primer, over the last couple of weeks, he started to ramp up his snaps, and he's basically an every down player right now. And Allen Hurns is really nobody to this team. So Michael Gallup, I mean, if the Cowboys don't trade for a receiver, I think it's possible that he pops up on the fantasy radar as like a bye week guy that you could plug in from time to time. But I don't think that you want to rely on anybody from this team for weekly production outside of Ezekiel Elliott.
Completely agree. I wouldn't mind having Gallup on sort of a watch list and especially with Nance's comments, which I did hear as well. But at this point, you're not relying on him, certainly not as an every week guy. Final game, Rams 39, 49ers 10. I mean, the Rams are really good on offense. I hope you appreciate that analysis.
What?
Is there any takeaway that you want to do? I could be like, hey, you know what? You should try to trade for that Todd Gurley guy or something like that. Is there anything you want to take away on the Rams side of the ball?
Yeah, Todd Gurley's going to break records, man.
There you go. I mean, he really is an absolutely phenomenal football player. He had 3 more touchdowns today, 2 rushing, 1 receiving. It's just ridiculous. If you got the number 1 pick, I mean, you are almost guaranteed to make the playoffs in your fantasy league, which is
that's not true, Dan. So the thing is here's
oh,
I know
no.
I died laughing in the preseason. I need to bring this up because I legitimately like Le'Veon Bell, but I was always saying if you don't pick Gurley, like I think you're screwing it up. And people told me that David Johnson should have been the number 1 pick. It should have been a home run. It should have been a home run. This was like
no, there is no debate about that. I could debate 2 through 4. I was fine to talk about Bell, Johnson, or Elliott from the 2 through 4. No debate about number 1, and it just wasn't close. So I rescind. If you had the number 1 pick and you took Todd Gurley, then there's almost no chance that you're not making your fantasy playoffs. Other than that, you just made a mistake, man. You should have listened to us. I don't know what you're doing. San Francisco, 10 points. I mean, George Kittle with the huge game, 98 yards and the touchdown. Anything else you want to talk about here?
No. CJ Beathard looked terrible. Took 7 sacks in this game. It seemed like he just couldn't get the ball out. And then the Rams, to be fair, Ndamukong Suh said in an interview this week saying that like they've been playing like crap and they needed to play better. They needed to get better. And they brought it today. So, I mean, it wasn't the best of competition or anything like that. But at the same time, they needed a game like this to build confidence for their defense because they had been playing like absolute crap. Mostert continued to look good again. Like Alfred Morris is just like a plotter at this point in time. Their offensive line doesn't allow for that. I think Mostert is a better player for this offense. And going into next week's matchup, I want to say they're playing the Cardinals.
Next week they're playing the Cardinals, yes.
A Cardinals team that has allowed the most touchdowns to running backs in the NFL. I think Mostert should be on the radar, like as someone that I'm sure we're going to talk about this in the waiver wire show tomorrow, but he looked good out there again. So, I mean, knowing he's still getting some snaps. And Matt Breida, by the way, limped off the field. So Breida looks like he might be hurt again.
Twice, by the way, just to be clear. He left, went into the medical tent, came back in, and then limped off the field again.
That guy should be shut down for a while, and it's clear that he can't handle a big workload. So Mostert also saw 4 targets, so he would probably walk into that role that Breida was playing, which is very valuable, especially in PPR formats. So pay attention to that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for today's show. Before we go, I do want to remind everyone to go to fantasypros.com/contest to get entered into the signed Davante Adams helmet giveaway. And I do want to say a quick thank you again to the sponsors of today's show, Pristine Auction. Remember, they have a ton of great items up for auction every day, so make sure to check them out at pristine.com. And Leesa Mattress, remember, you can get $160 off your mattress purchase when you go to leesa.com/fantasypros. On behalf of everyone here at Fantasy Pros, thanks for listening and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.